Where's your favorite place to take college game day? And I say every time, Eugene, Oregon.
Hello and welcome, Ducks fans. Where and whenever you're watching or listening, this is the OnceADuck podcast where we bring you up to date with current and former University of Oregon athletes and give you never-before-heard stories about your favorite teams and moments in Duck history. I'm Nick Cody, former offensive lineman at JustFollow61 on Twitter. With me, as always, to wrap up this football season and Pac-12 season is my co-host Sam at Samuel101TS. Sam, we got to see a Civil War. Oh, messed it up. Already off the bat, it is the Platte Cup to us here at the OnceADuck podcast. And you were there and present. It was your last game as the front senior member of the pit crew there, my friend. What was it like?
Man, what a game it was. What a surreal game it really was. Just because it felt like any other Oregon game, but there was this eerie vibe behind the entire day of it kind of being a last one. I don't mean to make it too much about myself because Oregon did come out. They played a very good ball game. Anthony Brown looked probably the best I'd seen him look all season long, at least in person, that is. This Oregon team, they played really well. They came out with a lot of energy. And if there had to be a last game at Autzen, beating Oregon State the way Oregon did was definitely a good way to go out.
Well, and I mean, I have no problem making it about you for a second because for our lightning yellow round, I just wanted to talk about our favorite moments and experiences in Autzen Stadium this season before we recap that game and then start talking about Utah. So I'll start us off this time on the clock. Ready, set, go. Obviously, my favorite part that is going to be gone now forever until I find the next sappy member of the pit crew that will let me in the very front row without hesitation. The group of you guys up there just welcoming me with open arms multiple times when I would just kind of lumber over there, usually right in the third quarter. Kind of found a nice sweet spot when you could get a couple good chants going and just get the hype going back in Autzen Stadium. And that was a lot of fun, buddy. Thank you.
Oh man, of course, anytime. It was great to have you in there while you were, especially when you're handing out stuff to the people around us. They were definitely a fan of that. And you know what? At least reflecting on just Saturday alone, it was so nice just to be down there with all the people that I'd been there with, whether it had been just the previous 6 games that season or it had been some people that I recognized from years and years earlier. There were people that I'd been down there with sophomore year, maybe even a couple freshman year that I recognized, was able to see there. And it really did have an impact. It was very special to be able to see so many people that I've become accustomed to seeing in that section, in that area, all enjoying the same game.
Yeah, and while I haven't had a ton of time to get around to all the tailgates this year, when I did, man, everybody is so great. And it's amazing each year, and I should just expect this. It kind of doubles how many times we get the podcast mentioned to us. And that was amazing just this season. And it was increasing and increasing and increasing. That was a lot of fun.
Man, just this Duck community, being able to see people out and about, whether it's going on the road to a game and seeing Duck fans that you know or that you know from social media, or just people from Autzen coming together. There are so many Duck fans that I've gotten the pleasure of meeting this year. It's been a lot of fun to be able to become all a part of the same Duck family together, but to know each other on a slightly more personal level.
And I'll wrap it up by saying not just Ducks fans, but even some opposing fans. I enjoyed and appreciated everybody that was there, and I encountered that. I had a really great time, especially after the Wazoo game, my last trip there, getting to just agree with a lot of people just on their way out saying, hey, you know what? Good game. Screw the Huskies. And we got an F the Huskies chant going, and that's how we wrap up our lightning yellow round. But speaking of FU chants, man, what a great one. Congratulations to you and the pit crew. I heard it at least 3 or 4 times on the television. I heard it was going live even more there in the stadium, and they had to cut the audio down a little bit in the booth. Tell me, how many times did you hear a good F the Beavers chant, and how many of those are you responsible for yourself, sir?
Well, you know what, Nick? This is gonna come in multiple parts, but it's worth it. throughout the entire season, whether it was Stony Brook or Fresno State, or it was Washington State or Oregon State, there were a lot of the whoever's. It was happening. It was going on. At no point was it stronger than it was against Oregon State. My goodness. People, the Oregon-Washington rivalry might get more time and touch on social media or whatever, but when it comes down to the students that are in that building, I think a lot more of them are anti-Beaver. At least it felt like it on Saturday. It was so loud. It was so boisterous. Normally, I don't always participate in the F the whoever chants. A lot of the time, I'm just sitting there going, is it necessary to F them? That they're fine. They haven't done anything worth effing over yet. But Oregon State, I was happily a part of many of those, especially when the teams got a little scrappy late. There were a lot of hold me back, bro moments in that section. A lot of people I know wanted to be able to jump out there, start swinging with the guys on green and yellow, really let the melee come out. It didn't happen. That being said, it was a lot of fun to be able to sit there, tease the Beavers. A quick story, and I know I've been telling one, but a quick story within a story. My buddy Patrick, I believe he went to high school, or he was friends in high school with somebody who was close with Musgrave, the tight end for Oregon State, number 88. Before the game, he showed me a sign, Patrick did, and it was number 88 from OSU owes me $33. He said, my buddy Patrick said, from high school, and they were all together, they all went to some game. It was like an Oregon game, or it was some game they went to. And he bought this guy a ticket, never ended up seeing that cash again. He had that sign out. He was shaking it. It was loud. It was fun. A couple of times we thought we saw 88 look over and nod or laugh or something like that. We weren't quite positive. But then after the game, Nick, I will post it when we post this podcast for proof. My buddy Patrick, he got a Venmo for $33 after that ball game. The man was paid back. He was able to come out on top, just like Oregon was on Saturday.
Wow, man. Making signs finally pays off. I love to hear it. That is a story of all-time Autzen Stadium signs, and we've mentioned a couple of them on here, and yeah, that'll definitely be a favorite of mine for a while. And on the subject of F the blank chats, usually we get one for at least the most deserving is usually Pac-12 referees. But I'm going to say, in my opinion, we might actually owe them a thank you this week. I believe that we probably should have got a targeting call. And targeting is something I have a lot of strong opinions on in terms of the way it's dictated, refereed, and especially the penalties involved. But without that, we might not have our defensive leader in the backfield on the first half of Friday's game. So thank you, Pac-12 referees. I don't know what did it seem like there on the field. I know, at least watching at home, it seemed absolutely certain that penalty was going to stand. And when they decided it wasn't targeting, I mean, it seemed like that's what got a lot of the Beaver side riled up, ready to go start fighting.
Well, Nick, I got to tell you, I think every single human being inside that building, besides the guys in stripes and Verone McKinley, thought that was a target.
Yeah.
You can even see Mario Cristobal when he's approaching Verone McKinley saying, hey, look up on the board, man. Look up there. You caught him. You definitely caught him, man. And I can see what the argument is against it. People are saying, well, look, his eyes were on the football. They were up. He wasn't trying to make the contact. You can make the argument. Both of them kind of raised the shoulder, brought the head in against each other. Kind of a natural reaction when you know contact is coming. But man, if I haven't seen that play called a target so many times before, so many times watching college football, I've seen a bang, bang play. Two guys look like they're going for the ball. One hits the other in the head. Boom. They call it. Not even a question. It's nothing.
So many times this season for the Ducks,
yes,
when it's been less questionable than that, we've been on the wrong end of that.
Kayvon Thibodeau got one in that Stanford game that was a love tap.
Bridges had another in that.
Bridges, another one, the kickoff of that ball game. Bridges, by the way, congratulations to him. A first interception of his career, able to pick off Chase Nolan there on the Hail Mary at the end of the half.
Yeah, fantastic point. I thought overall I was impressed, even in spite of more injuries on the defensive side. We're also lucky we didn't have Thibodeau go down, because he was hurt in there quite a bit in that game too. And of course, Noah Sewell not being there in the second half had a big impact on the game and on how accurate I think my prediction would have been if he was still able to play.
Well, you know what? With Noah Sewell, having been at so many Oregon games this year, being able to watch on the sideline, especially being all of 15 feet away from the medical bench or whatever we are right there. So many times this season, we've seen this exact same thing happen. And I have to give my buddy Luis Arado a shout out here. He gave it the term, the JJ Watt effect. When you play so hard on every single down that you can't help but getting yourself hurt. And I've seen Noah Sewell so many times this season absolutely laying down the wood and just putting a hurting on people. But every now and then he'll on one of those hits, gets a stinger. That arm's not moving for a good 10, 15 minutes. He's got to shake it out there, standing on the sideline, rotating that shoulder, trying to warm it back up. He's got a habit of doing it to himself. The kid might need to be careful because Oregon needs him in these ball games. That being said, though, you have to love the energy, love the aggression, love what he brings to this Oregon defense.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a playmaker for this team, and around the country, anybody that tunes into an Oregon game, he jumps off the film almost immediately. He is always, if he is not there making a play, he was near the football or on the way to make a play. And, that's just when you play with that kind of energy, it's always some, but you could tell he looked like one of his arms, he couldn't even get going. And I've had a couple stingers like that, particularly against Oregon State, as we've talked about a little bit in the Phil Dunphy game in one of our first season episodes, Uncivil. That was a good one. But I've had one of those stingers there where your arm just isn't right. And if you can't show them, like the trainers will come put resistance on it. If you can't push back a certain amount, you're going to have to sit out and put some ice on it, end your day. And that was always the toughest, man. I always hated having to end a game early, get up, wrap ice, or especially I've never had to take my shoulder pads off, thankfully, because that's just kind of the worst feeling, being that guy out there coming out at the end of, second half without pads on, and everyone knows, because it's one of those just discouraging feelings, especially when you see a team like Oregon State start to rally, start to finally find some offensive rhythm, which they really could barely find in the first half, because we came out and controlled the football. We're efficient on offense, especially on third down. And we made enough big plays to really get a big lead early that made me feel really, really confident.
From the very first drive, Oregon came out and they just looked super crisp, whether it was just being able to get the ball down the field the way they were, the confidence they had going forward on 4th and 1, their own side of the field. Dye's able to break that for a touchdown. Didn't that feel like a vintage Oregon Ducks football moment right there? It's 4th and 1. You're inside your own territory. It's early. It could still kind of go either way. You've got that vibe, and then boom, a big play for Oregon. Of course it's on the ground. Of course it's due to some absolutely perfect blocking, phenomenal all around, a giant hole for Dye. He's able to take off and get to the end zone. That play right there is just so emblematic of what I think of when I think Oregon football. It's making a big play where you don't necessarily need it, but it completely turns the tide and turns the momentum of the entire ball game. One other thing that I need to mention it early, and I need to mention it now before I potentially forget it, even though there's a low chance I would. Applause is necessary for Anthony Brown. He played a phenomenal ball game against Oregon State. That throw on the run to Devin Williams was right in front of me. If you watch the video on that throw, you can see me leaning on the bar, sitting right there going, he better fucking catch this. This looks like a good throw right here. Because that's exactly what I was saying. Nick, throw one in the swear jar for me. I deserve it right there.
I got you, dude.
Truthfully, it was such a perfect ball. It was such a perfect moment, whether it was that throws to Hudson that were phenomenal, a great throw to Thornton on the sideline that I remember on the opposite side of the field of where I was. He came out and played a phenomenal ball game. He got his fair share of criticism after the Utah game. A lot of people were going after him. He struggled in that game. It was very clear Utah put him in the position to. He bounced back in a huge way against Oregon State, and I really pray that's the Anthony Brown we see this coming Friday.
Well, not just that. I thought our defensive line really stepped up too. But yes, Anthony Brown had his best game as a Duck, in my opinion, and it came at the best time. And again, third down is when he does his most work. And I feel like the only times this offense stopped clicking was, again, some of those silly mistakes or kind of misreads on occasion in terms of the passing game. But it feels like, if we aren't false starting, when we are consistently getting 3 or 4 yards, even on our kind of down plays, we're pushing those piles forward like we did in that game. There's very little you can do to stop this offense from just even just getting down and in field goal range scoring. And then when our defense is healthy and playing at their top, you're lucky to get any points, if not turn the ball over to us. So I see what we're looking for and what we need to establish to try and turn the tides against Utah in this upcoming game.
Well, and speaking of that defensive line, he's had plenty of big games and big moments before, but if there was ever the Brandon Dorless game, this was absolutely it. Absolutely it. This guy was in the backfield all day long, just throwing people down. I remember one play specifically. He just swam past the offensive lineman like it was a buoy in the bay right there. Just got right past him into the backfield, was able to throw Baylor down with some authority. That got the entire place going. Seeing number 3 right there, not just be able to clog up the running lanes, but also be able to get into the backfield and cause some damage is just such a great sight to see. He has so much energy. And I remember last year we were talking on the podcast, this is a guy who could be really big for Oregon here next year. He has been, and he was in this game. He was just phenomenal.
Yeah, I remember I tweeted out, Dorless says no, because it was just boom, right there in the backfield, wraps him up. He's had a little bit of trouble sometimes. He's gotten a lot of penetration this season and not been able to find the pay dirt of getting either the sack or the tackle, getting that wrap up. He's had a couple busted tackles, but this game, it was just on point. He was ready for everything. He really, seeing a guy peak late in November, that's when a guy is really starting to come into his own as a young football player on the offensive or defensive lines, because it's tough. You're in there, you're battling all season. The guys that start peaking right now, that's championship football right there. And championship offensive and defensive lines are the only way you get into and win championship games.
I think besides Dorless, who had a great game, Popo played another really strong game inside. This was a game when they were without Ware Hudson, who it looks like they'll be out for some time moving forward, just by what the team has said and by the brace we saw on his knee on the sideline. It doesn't look like a guy you're going to see back anytime soon. So being able to have Popo in there causing problems. My guy Brandon Swinson on the outside, able to get in there a few times, throw some guys down. I know him and I were talking right after the game. He's like, man, you got to post that video. I had to send it over to him. It got on his Instagram story. I put it out there a couple times. We were talking back and forth about it a little bit. Love the energy he was bringing right there, the intensity. Love the intensity of this Oregon defense in general. I thought they really locked up in a good way. Some of the younger corners, they had a couple of moments where there were some things you wish you could have seen be a little better. McHale Wright, he got a little banged up there in the second half, but he's supposed to be full go on Friday. This Oregon secondary, with every rep that doesn't go their way, they're learning just a little bit more. So this is a group that's only getting better. This Oregon defense is very exciting, and I love the energy they showed.
Yeah, and in that scenario, you saw, Oregon State really went after Manning once Wright left the game. But those reps right now in a scenario where you're ahead, you have a pretty good lead. Thankfully, some of that on the part of Oregon State. Thank you for going for all those 2-pointers. Otherwise, probably would have had a little more.
What was that?
That's just one of those things where I understand it from watching the telecast, because there was a sense of desperation from Oregon State's side when they finally were able to get in the end zone, because it was thinking, man, at that point, they might not have another chance to get down there. And, that's the only explanation for it, because mathematically and in terms of football strategy, you don't want to do that. We know that from Nebraska. Oregon fans are haunted by that. We've talked about it on this podcast before. The 2-point play is a very useful thing if you have a code that you live by for it. It's not just the return of Dexter making me think of this kind of stuff. It's literally, we had rules established. You line up. If they don't align, you run the play. If they line up exactly to guard it, that we know through an entire week of film study where you go over it in a couple meetings, then you just don't run it. Take the extra point, especially it's not an NFL extra point. So you should be able to make it with even your backup kicker. So I don't know. I had some people ask if the Oregon State kicker was hurt. I don't know. To me, it felt like desperation. And I think at least any Oregon fan there was sitting there kind of like chuckling a little bit to themselves thinking, man, we've got this game. They're scared.
Well, you know what? I'll give, as much as people were ragging on Jonathan Smith and Oregon State for those 2-point conversion calls, which I agree were very suspect at times, I'll give them a lot of credit. One of the best calls of the game was their onside kick call. It was a great time to do it. Great place to do it. Oregon wasn't ready, though. The one player that did have any kind of shot at it kind of just froze up in the moment on it. Great play call there. Last thing I'll say, Nick, because we do have a guest coming on, and he is, I think we can call him a lucky charm, at least through this podcast so far when it comes to Pac-12 championship games. The last thing I'll say about this Oregon State game, man, the color on color is too darn good. This needs to be a regular thing. I vote anytime Oregon State's at home, they'll wear black. Oregon wears yellow. Anytime Oregon's at home, Oregon wears green. Oregon State wears orange. I love it. I think it'll look good. I'm not even giving you a chance to comment on it because, Nick, we have a guest. He is somebody who you know well, who this podcast knows well, our listeners know well. Team up and let's get him in here.
Not one, not two, but 3-time guest, my favorite and my guard, Mark Asper. With us again for a third time is our good luck charm. We had to bring him back because we are undefeated when Mark Asper is on the show in a Pac-12 championship week. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Hope we can bring the Duckies a little luck.
Yeah, and before we talk about this Utah game or Pac-12 championships in general, I saw you got to make it back to Eugene this weekend. And before we ask about your experience, I just got to say, how much time have you spent with your daughters on those 3-point stances? Because I saw some photos, and, man, those are looking mean. You almost have a full offensive line there ready to go, buddy.
There's we start off – we prepare against a faceless opponent. We're trying to be 1-0 every week. We get out there, bright and early, 6:30, little dynamic warm up, little stretch. We roll right into some Fuji, then we go Indy, and we just work on that 3-point stance. It's got to be muscle memory.
Oh, man, love it. That's the exact canned coaching response we expected out of Nate Costa, not you. But what's it really like going and seeing all the facilities now and getting to experience that with generations of your own family and them just kind of being wowed by all of it just along with you?
So I think I mentioned it before. It's getting to the point that my daughters are old enough that the boys in their grade think it's cool. Right. It's the cool by association factor. You see somebody with an Oregon Ducks shirt or something, and she's like, oh, hey, my dad played for the Ducks. And they, what? Your dad played for the Ducks? And so that was kind of the recurring theme of the tour. I was doing I once was, look at, hey, my name's here. Hey, I helped win that. Hey, LaMichael got that Doak Walker award because of me. And my girls are like, oh, the boys in my class are going to be so jealous when I tell them I was at the Oregon Duck facility.
Well, I mean, I do the same thing, but just for Twitter cred. So, I understand it.
No, but it was cool. And my wife, she hadn't been back to she hadn't seen the newer facilities, right? We were married back when I played. And so she'd been to the old facilities. She knew that, all very, very well and good. To see the new facility and see some of the cool stuff that they've done to, celebrate the past and promote the future and do all that stuff. She was very impressed.
Mark, as Nick said, you had a chance to be at that Oregon State game live and in person on Saturday. You were able to kind of take in some of that action. Wish I could have seen you. I was a little bit busy throwing giant red dice in the end zone, but from your time watching that ball game from your seat, what were you able to see from this Oregon team? What kind of gave you maybe a little bit of excitement moving forward and some things you think they got to clean up this week?
So some things I liked, they were rolling in a lot of people. I think, they fully embraced where they're at from a personnel and injury standpoint. They're rolling guys in, they're getting lots of depth and experience. So they're not as, shell shocked and gun shy. They got a comfortable lead there in the middle of the game, so they were able to play some of their deeper positions, which I liked. I'm, of that mentality. of get guys on the field, get them experience. Nothing replaces time in the seat, right? That I liked. I liked some of the defensive energy and, some turnovers and some ball hawking and some stuff like that. That gives me a lot of enthusiasm as an offensive player and as a Duck fan, right? I liked, but it only happens by accident. I like when AB breaks the pocket, runs to his right, scramble drill a little bit, and throws that ball on the run. I wish so much that we had more incorporated QB movement runs, some sprint out, some full bootleg, some naked bootleg, anything to get him on the run. I think he is a run pass threat kind of guy. I'd love it if we did a little bit more of that on purpose. When he does it accidentally, I think he's like 4 for 5 and 4 touchdowns with that. Roll to his right, catch somebody cheating because he's a running quarterback, and they play up, they come up to defend the pass, he pops it over the top, and it's beautiful. I also went to the Utah game in Salt Lake the week before the Civil War, and he had one of those again, but he overshot his dude in the end zone, right?
Yeah.
They did that more often, made it more comfortable, had him run and gun on the pass. I don't know. I know they tried it early on in the season and they were like, hey, let's keep him in the pocket for accuracy purposes, but he's really good when he's mobile. I like it.
I also noticed in that Utah game, a lot of times they were running stunts on the backside of when he'd roll out, and that guy rolling back around was already taking an angle to go and try and beat him on the sidelines. And that kind of got us a couple times when that right tackle is in a two-way go, and then he thinks he's got an opportunity to step up, and nope, Looper's coming right around. And that got us into big trouble a couple of times. And man, it's always tough. And that's why you got to love the game of football. Anything could happen any given Saturday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, whenever they're playing the games. We're out there, we're ready to play. And we always were, I know, buddy. We were in that first Pac-12 championship game. Always got to mention it. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of that day against UCLA?
I remember 2 things. I remember the scaffold, the built-on scaffolding that they threw into Autzen Stadium, because it was top-ranked team used to host the Pac-12, because it was the first year we were the top-ranked. We hosted, and they put in all that extra scaffolding. And then the second thing I remember is the flamethrowers. They didn't tell us about the flamethrowers coming onto the field. The Fox, Dr. Pepper, or somebody was I think it was Dr. Pepper was putting on the show. And so they brought in all this extra stuff for us to run out onto the field. They didn't tell us those were flamethrowers. And when I come out onto the field, I'm not one of those dudes that sprints the 100 and high fives dudes in the end zone. I'm like, all right, I get to the 30, I turn left and go to the sideline. So I'm jogging out, hustling, not full lineman trot, and these flamethrowers go off next to me, and I was like, completely took off guard. I think I singed some arm hair. I was like, there was nobody. There wasn't like tape. There wasn't like a person. Like somebody could have been full on. Like, what's this? And got a flamethrower to the face.
Oh man,
Mark, it's a very interesting thing being in a Pac-12 championship game, especially when you're a team like Oregon who didn't know for sure they would be in that game until the game ended on Saturday. How is it that you can kind of go into another week of preparation like that and make sure that your team is as ready as they need to be, not only on short notice, but also with a game that you weren't aware you were going to be playing until very recently?
I've heard some of the sports talk guys around the country, or the local Oregon guys, talk about Coach Cristobal's team culture. What kind of culture does his team have? And this week will be, kind of a real testament of what kind of culture he's built for the Ducks and what true identity this team has. Because, this used to be what we did, was kind of our strength when Nick and I played, is teams would try to prepare for us in 1 week, right? They'd come out during the regular season and they would try to simulate our tempo at practice. And they'd talk about simulating tempo. They talk about running 2 scout team offenses against the first team defense and stuff like that. And doing that so out of the ordinary, that unusual training, or the out of the ordinary, out of the process, is what I think got a lot of teams in trouble and behind, because then they were worn out. They weren't used to it. They were so worried about that they weren't fundamentally sound. So, preparing for a short week, even in the NFL, when the teams turn around and they play on a Thursday night, it's like, if you have a process, if you have good team culture, if you trust that process. If you have coaches that, do this thing, bonus that it's a team that we've played before, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel too much. You've got that familiarity. I think that's kind of what they need to lean on, is like, you can't, whatever you do now, it's too late to change what you do and who you are to prepare for somebody. If you aren't the team that can do this kind of thing, it'll be revealed. If you are the kind of team that can turn around quick and prepare for an opponent quick, awesome. And that's what we'll discover, both, from Utah coming to play us again and us having a short turnaround to play another game.
Yeah. And I think, the culture of this team, and it showed this last week against Oregon State, particularly on the early first drives, was physicality and toughness. That's what they really bring to the table. And that's the game that they have to play. And I really felt like when they played against Utah, you saw when they panicked, got a little nervous, and got away from that. I think the moment that the tides really changed in that game were as soon as we try and run a reverse to a freshman. And that's a tough situation where you have to know if that play is broken, you got to get upfield. But no, young guys going to try and get what he can get. We end up, putting yourself in the second or third and 30 or something, and you just can't make up yards that way. What do you think about our toughness matched up against Utah in a second match? Do you think we could take advantage of?
So I will say the atmosphere in Salt Lake was pretty cool. It was like, I recognize, like, this would be a great environment to play as a home team. Sellout crowd, all red. They had the battleships, and they did the memorial for the players that they lost and all that stuff. It was great, super, like, incredible energy. Vegas is going to be a home-ish type game for Utah. I think a lot of people that I know around, Southern Idaho and around the Salt Lake area where I do a lot of work, there's a lot of people I know going to this game. They're hitting me up, hey, you going, I'm going, kind of deal. So that energy is going to be tough. I think same deal. If we don't get behind early, if we don't get that pop in the mouth, it's kind of like we could have benefited from a Tennessee type thunderstorm in that Utah game. A break, a breath, a refresh, a reset, because it was just, Utah was on us quick early, and it was just oppressive. And then the crowd really started to be like, oh, we can do this, and we're going to beat these dudes, because everybody was very apologetic, and very like, oh, we'll give the Ducks a good fight, but you guys are ranked number 3 and you guys are tough. And, everybody was like very apologetic at first. Come third quarter, man, nobody was apologizing for nothing. They were laying it on thick. And I'm like, I get it. It's like the perfect storm right now with injuries and transfers and everything that's going on. Good for you guys. So if the Ducks don't let themselves get in that position, they come out tough, establish dominance like they did at Oregon State, I think it's going to be a much different story, and they'll kind of show that thing that's made them successful all year so far.
Mark, something I'm curious about that you were able to see in person there in Salt Lake. One thing that sticks out to me as I look at the box score from that ball game, I see there's only 6 rushes to die. Obviously, throughout that ball game, Utah did a very good job of stopping the run in general, but discouraging Oregon from wanting to go to what's worked throughout the season. From your perspective, as somebody who's done quite a bit of run blocking in his life, what was Utah really doing to make that so difficult for Oregon, and what can the Ducks do to try to remedy that issue they faced in Salt Lake?
I felt like, not sticking with that, not sticking to the run game, and getting behind early, put them in like kind of a panic with the trick play early. Like Nick said, trick play early to me was always a warning bell. Like, hey, why are we going to the back of the play card already? Like, stick with what you do. It's a long game. It's a long, operation, because trick plays are great if you get them, but risk reward, the energy and the excitement, because they were like, the crowd went nuts when they stopped that trick play. They were like, oh yeah, you got to go to them trick plays, and we still stopped you. You ain't got nothing. Like, so they're big boys up front. They did a really good job of just falling off tackles. I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying anything about the Pac-12 officiating, but that was one thing that I thought, as I was starting to get a little frustrated, I started to watch, and I'm like, well, that's, why is that a penalty? That's not a penalty. Some of that stuff was going on. And I started to think, maybe they were just more physical than we were. They were getting off blocks. Our guys weren't weren't holding on to dudes. They weren't finishing blocks. Their linebackers were flying off the wall. It's great that we have a stool, but they have one too that's pretty good, right?
Well, what's it like, and we've been in those yourself, but what's it like as an offensive lineman when you see the other team, they're able to get out on the edge, maybe get that hand up inside underneath the shoulder that isn't going to get called. You see them turning the pads, and then you get out there and it feels like you just barely get a hand on someone and flag's coming out. What's that like, and how does that adjust how you're playing the game?
My best like technique block ever in my life got called for a hold. It was against Washington State. I came off, I was up to the linebacker, grabbed a hold of him, drove him, pancaked him. I got, we popped one for 20 or something. And I was like, yeah, I turned around and there was a flag on the field. And I was like, that is the best block, like technically perfectly blocked I've ever done. And you flagged that? I couldn't believe it. And that was, whenever we would go up to Wazoo, it was always kind of, in doubt for the first little bit, and then we'd eventually pull out and away. But it feels very frustrating. And that, that has to go to talking about team culture and what you have to be able to just put that out of your mind and be like, okay, I control what we can control. I can't decide what the ref decides to flag. I just got to do me. And I gotta stick to what I know. Right. And have an offensive line coach that won't accept excuses and, throw the hat at you and be like, I don't care. I don't care if they call hold. You need to not get, do it better. And you're like, okay.
That was the highlight for me of the alumni tailgate is getting to point to Sam and be like, see that hat over there? He's still wearing it. That's the one that was thrown at me many, many times. Because he still had it on, man. It's got a lot of memories in that hat.
Yeah.
Speaking of offensive lines and in this group that Oregon has, it's no doubt that Oregon's gotten an offensive line that's a lot bigger than maybe years past, a lot stronger. And this has been a theme throughout the Cristobal era. One thing that I saw that I really, really have liked all season long, and a little bit of it's been due to some injuries that we've seen on the field, Oregon's ability to adapt, so many big bodies in that room, able to take care of business, be able to plug into positions. What have you really liked from this Oregon offensive line? And has there been one guy that's really stuck out to you as somebody who either is currently or will soon one day be one of those premier guys for Oregon on the line?
I always joke that, when people sometimes will say, oh, I say, oh yeah, I played, they find out, hey, you're a big dude. Did you play ball? I'm like, yeah, I played at Oregon. And they're like, oh, they're like apologetic. Oh, sorry, I didn't recognize you. And I'm like, I played offensive line. We're a nameless mass, right? Yeah. We're 5 individuals functioning as one thing. Like, I don't care that you didn't, shouldn't feel bad. My own wife and mother sometimes didn't know who I was or when I was in. Like, we'd be at home watching the game and they'd be like, oh, look, you did so good on that block. And I'm like, that's Monica Gregg, Mom. He's a 5'10" Paul. Like, you can't tell me apart from him. I'm 79. He's 63. Like, the numbers aren't even the same. He plays on the left. I play right guard. He's left guard, Mom. Come on. So I look at them as a unit, as one group. I've always believed in that Coach Greatwood mentality of they need to be interchangeable. It's been great to have some Outland Trophy caliber individuals the last couple of years, but offensive line play is so different than anything else, right? One guy messes up and we still get a sack. Doesn't matter how high you grade out. One guy messes up, the play is still busted. Like, offensive line play, working as a unit is the biggest thing. That's why I like that they've been able to rotate some dudes in and get some experience, but I do think, with experience comes, with the younger guys on the offensive line, I noticed this in the Utah game. I noticed it again in the Oregon State game. Some of those younger guys are so focused on their assignment that they're not playing football, right? There's a pass play, the right tackle set Hutt. He does his kicks. The defensive end drops into coverage and he doesn't do anything. He's like, I kick 2 steps, defensive end. He doesn't react and come back in and get some rib meat off of the defensive tackle, right? He doesn't crash back in. He doesn't look for a play to make a play. Young guys that's kind of the, when I talk about the speed and the tempo of the game that slows down and things that change, that's just, playing football as an offensive lineman where you're looking for extra plays, you're looking to get extra pancakes and cuts. I think when Nick and I played, that was something that as we gained more experience, you were constantly looking for work. It wasn't just, oh, I did my assignment, check down, check backer, nothing there, plus on the grade sheet. It was check down, check backer, go find some work, go put a lick on somebody. And, that's that game within the game. You do that so many times, it puts a little fear into the defensive lineman of like, somebody's going to come for me. And then they don't rush as hard. They're not as sound on their run fits because they know if they're only rushing 3, that leaves 2 free hitters on the O-line. And if you got guys that are free hitting, totally legal between the whistles, all that stuff, it slows defenses down. And that's something that comes with like a more experienced lineman group. Yeah. I haven't seen them the last 2 games. I haven't seen them do a lot of that. I saw a lot of dudes do their assignment and then not stop and not play football. Yeah.
And we had so many reps together. That's what I loved about it is we got to the point where we knew the defense was running certain games and we'd set them up to tee off. I'd already know as soon as this guy went with an inside move, Asper was just going to be ready there to bam, lay him out and vice versa. And that would set up Anthony Brown a lot better in some of these pass plays. If Utah does, again, come out, try to use a lot of the line games, a lot of stunting, a lot of movement right before the snap, that's a good way to neutralize it, is just always be ready for anything. Always have your head on a swivel. And I've always loved that about you, Mark. You've always been looking for those extra shots and rib meat. That's something I gotta add to the podcast vocabulary there. Gotta get a chunk of that rib meat when they're going by. But as we really kind of wrap up this last thought about the Pac-12 championship game in Utah, you did note that it used to be played in the home stadium. What's the difference about going to a neutral site? Particularly, as you said, Oregon fans don't always travel all these things, and Utah it's going to be really, really easy for them. I know flights out of Eugene, you got to go to Portland or somewhere else because you're not going to get there in time if you try and fly out of Eugene this week. So what's it like when you are at a neutral site game, you're outnumbered and everything's kind of going against you?
It's one of those, you have to have that road warrior mentality, get on it early, get after it, and kind of, flip the crowd, silence the, you have to treat it like a road game. If you're outnumbered, even if it's a neutral site, you just have to treat it like a road game and go in, be about your business, establish the things that you are good at early, and don't give the majority crowd the opportunity to get back into it. Those neutral site games are a lot of fun because they're usually at, historic locations or NFL stadiums. And so you get a little piece of that, big time, big show highlight, game that you're dreaming about as a high school player and as a college player. And so that emotion and that hype can be good. It's best for the teams that have been there before. So I think, Oregon's got some guys that have been, some experienced and dudes that have been in those games. Hopefully, they have an opportunity to lead and speak to their teammates and be about, hey, we've been here before. This is our 3rd one in 3 years. This is, we live here. This is what we do. Utah hasn't been here, in a bit. So let's get after this. Let's do what we do and be about us and not worry about them and the crowd and just kind of focus narrow, kind of, it's a Kevin Costnerism that Chip always would steal. Clear the mechanism, just be about you and your guys and what you got to do. Don't worry about all that extra noise.
Mark, the last thing I'll ask you before we get out of here, Oregon, this is their 3rd straight Pac-12 championship game appearance. Last year, they won a game in an empty stadium against USC. The year before that, they won the game up in the Bay Area in Santa Clara. This year, it's in Vegas. You mentioned it, that the crowd's going to be split, but there will be a whole lot of Utah fans there in attendance. You mentioned Oregon having kind of done this before, having been there in those last 2 games, the culture that Cristobal has created that you mentioned earlier. How does that benefit a team like this? And then if you had to kind of give us a feel, maybe not a final score, but a feel for how this game will turn out, what would you kind of say?
I'd say it gives the Ducks the advantage of experience, right? There is something to that. I can remember in high school, and the very first, we weren't very good in football, but we were pretty good in basketball. The first time we went to the state tournament in basketball when I was a freshman, and it was weird traveling and doing all those things. It was a weird experience and weird environment, and you weren't used to it. And then the next year it was like, oh yeah, I remember how this worked. And then the next year, oh yeah, this is what we do. And then you win, I can even remember, even the first, that first Rose Bowl we went to, we played Ohio State. And, it was like, okay, we've been to this location before to play UCLA, but it was, different environment. They took us off the field early. They cut our warm up short, and it was like, because they had to do, extra stuff for the, pregame stuff, and knowing those kinds of things and getting used to those kinds of things. It lets you take that emotion and that energy and be constructive with it instead of, nervous and, expect, a telltale for me is like overthrown passes and, dropped balls, turnovers, little like mental errors, timing errors, things like that happen early. Whenever I'm watching a game at a neutral field or a big hype game, that's when I always know, okay, that team's got a lot of energy and a lot of excitement, but they're not harnessing it well. And whoever can harness that first and get kind of into that zone, I think will be better off for this game. Hopefully, I anticipate the Ducks having been through this. Like I said, if the leaders on the team, if the seniors that have been through this kind of stuff, take that time, having a coach gives them an opportunity to voice that to their team and show their leadership and get everybody rallied up, I think it'll be a much better opportunity. Prediction, I'm going with, we're going 31 Ducks to 31-21 final.
I like it. I love it. And putting the Ducks in another Rose Bowl, which I'll close up with this question for you. I know you were one of the few sane people that manages to avoid most of social media. And there's been a lot of fans, I think, since that Utah loss that have really been putting down what it means to go to the Rose Bowl. And I just can't imagine a day where the Oregon fan thinks that they're too good for the Rose Bowl. Mark, tell all the people out there just what that experience is like and why every Duck fan out there should be proud for an opportunity to go to the Rose Bowl.
So I do. I dabble. I peep. I creep the social medias. I don't slide anything, but I keep an eye when I can. I did see a Nick Saban rant the other day about entitlements to fan bases, and his comment about it used to be when I first got here, we were happy to win a couple of games. Now all of a sudden, and then he was channeling Oklahoma State. These kids, these kids are doing everything they're supposed to be doing. If you want to criticize somebody, you come criticize me. Don't criticize my boys. And so, the Rose Bowl, the Granddaddy Mall, all of that stuff. Yeah, I can remember the enthusiasm and the excitement and just everybody losing their minds when we went to play Ohio State, and never take for granted, never be complacent, never be, I can't stand that. It was the same thing happened when we were like blowing people out, when we were, really in the heyday and we were scoring lots of points. People would leave early, third quarter. They're like, oh, we up by 40, we out. And just that, the old school, fans that have been through thick and thin, they're like, these new, young pups don't understand. Well, I used to sit through games when we would lose by 40. I'm sitting through every game that we win by 40, come hell or high water. And so I loved the Rose Bowl. That was, I took my kids, like I said at the beginning, I took my kids back to the stadium, and, that trophy case there at the lobby, that was, the first one that the girls pointed out were those Rose Bowl trophies at the end. And they're like, oh, those are so cool. What's that for? And I was like, those are for the Rose Bowl. And that one right there is for me and my boys back in 2012. And so that's never be jaded or feel like it's unimportant or anything less than a tremendous accomplishment to get to the Rose Bowl and have an opportunity to play in that game. I know tons of people that would trade places with us happily if they had the opportunity, but you don't get to do that. You got to earn it. And that's another thing about this Ducks team. They've persevered through a bunch of stuff. They got an opportunity to redeem. You know, I can't tell you how many games I wish I could redeem against the team that got away from us, or that we had we laid an egg on to be like, hey, I want one more shot at those dudes. Have an opportunity to do that in a situation like the Pac-12 Championship game with the opportunity to go to Rose Bowl on the line. I anticipate these guys coming out hot and ready like a Little Caesars pizza. And go Ducks, big trust, whoop, whoop, whatever.
I love it, man. And thank you very much. Our very own special Once a Duck good luck charm. Thank you, Mark. Go Ducks.
Go Ducks.
Oh, love it, man. Appreciate you.
Anytime.
Well, Mark Asper's always been great. We thought we might have another guest this week, but hey, just Mark is fine as long as we get that good luck charm in, and he never disappoints, Sam.
You know what? Mark is one of my favorites to have on here because not only is he giving us a variety of poses throughout the interview, which I love to be able to see every now and then, be able to either look up or look on past, but also Mark just has such a great energy and such a wealth of knowledge. It's always appreciated when he's able to jump in here, especially for a Pac-12 championship game. He's 2-0 right now, looking to go 3-0. Really hope we don't have to change it up for the next time around. Really hoping that this keeps working.
Yeah, gave us this pig too. I love it. He's already a professional. He's already got the show down. And yeah, don't gotta have any pre-show with him. We can just jump right into it whenever, wherever. Love it. Love his experiences and getting to know, that he and his family can appreciate Autzen this very day with a whole new, kind of experience, going back and seeing some brand new things that just weren't even there before. And that's why OnceADuck is the greatest place to kind of ask those questions, get someone to talk about, open up about, just getting to see that stuff again and see it from a whole new perspective as a former player. Because I know going back every time this season, like Mark said, you see everything and you're like, oh, my name's over here, or this trophy over here. And it's just so special. And what would make it even more special, one more Pac-12 championship trophy, baby. I would love to see another one of those in there, and some three-peat shirts, merchandise, all that. But first, you got to take care of the game. And in this football game, I think it's going to be a big test early in the first quarter to see if we can establish the run game and get some points on the board. If we can get Dye in the end zone in the first 3 drives, I feel confident about the Ducks getting this win, Sam.
Well, you know what? In that last game when Oregon and Utah faced off, Oregon was outrushed on attempts alone by 27. Oregon ran the ball 23 times. Utah ran it 50 times. The difference in yards is astounding. 208 for the Utes to 63 for Oregon. Right there, immediately, the bold-faced truth as to what needs to happen. Oregon has to do what has made them successful all season, whether it was what won them the game in Columbus, whether it was what was really able to solidify some of those games, especially against UCLA, Washington State, Oregon State. And that is run the ball effectively. Oregon has been almost at its best this year when passing is something you do as a luxury. It's something you do because it's what's available now that this team is so focused on stopping the run. And that's the position Oregon needs to put Utah in. They can't be forced out of their game plan. They can't be forced to do what makes them uncomfortable. They have to stick with this run game. They have to use Dye, use Cardwell, use Brown, use McGee if you need to, use Benson if you need to. Sean Dollars was practicing with pads on recently. That's very good to hear. Maybe even use him if he's available. Oregon has to run the rock.
Well, and the way you run the rock, as we saw in the last game, effectively, is you set it up with great formations and great motion to choose not only to put the defense in bad positions, but force their hand to show you exactly what they're doing. And I thought a big reason that we weren't able to do a lot of that against Utah is we had a receiving core that was mostly guys that hadn't been out there with that same experience to run our system. What you saw with a week of practice going against Oregon State is we saw some great spread, empty backfield, and then motion into either some run plays or keeping the defense spread out and making them have to either dictate whether they're going to add an extra guy into the box or cover our receivers. And it left a lot of wide open plays in our offense. And I think that's something Coach Moorhead has to do really, really well this week. Again, to scheme our guys up in position positions where we saw multiple times on third down, they had no answer for the swing pass to die out of the backfield or even just hanging out there already in 5 wide. And those kind of formations, those kinds of things help make everything easier for your offensive line, because when the box is clearly dictated, everyone knows where they're working to. Like Asper said, you're able to react because you aren't spending the time thinking. You know where everyone's going to be at because it's that much clearer.
Well, and Nick, if you had to guess, if you just had to have a random guess, how many guys is it good to have catch multiple balls in a game? If you had to say, oh, this number of receivers should have more than one catch, how many would you say that is?
First of all, how many receivers are you giving me? Because right now our depth chart.
How about this? I'll give you 5 scholarship receivers and then 4 scholarship tight ends.
Okay, then I would like to see the ball spread around to at least 6 guys.
Well, I can tell you, when Oregon went to Salt Lake City, all of 3 players had multiple catches. Yes. Hudson had 4, Williams had 5, Thornton had 2. Besides that, everybody else had 1 grab, including Travis Dye, a guy we know can be electric out of the backfield, catching the ball either on a wheel route or on something right up the middle on a little RPO action. That's a guy who needs to be involved in the run game as well as the pass game. Oregon against Oregon State looked much better passing. Hudson looked great. Williams looked great. Thornton looked great. Even some of those younger guys got in there and made a difference and looked really good. I'm going to need to see them all play really well this weekend. Devin Williams, we know kind of what he's been. He's been close to an all-conference kind of guy in terms of receiving, especially the second half of this season. He's gotten way more comfortable and confident. But I'm going to need to see Hudson continue to play at a high level. He caught his first touchdown against Oregon State. Going to need more production there, as well as Thornton, a guy who's been getting into it a little bit, a big body, had that great catch on the sideline against Oregon State, touchdown earlier this season against Stony Brook. He's a big athletic guy who'll need to get into it. And Troy Franklin, a guy we all know can absolutely ball out. Number 11 has to get comfortable and confident. He probably should have received a touchdown in that Oregon State game. He was wide open running down the sideline. AB just overthrew him slightly. This receiving core, they're going to need to be active. They're going to need to be ready, and they're going to need to produce for Oregon to get this W over Utah.
Yeah, and there were moments going back looking against that Utah game that we could have hit big plays on their defensive backs, but just the timing and familiarity between the quarterbacks and receivers wasn't there. I know at least we're going to be a lot more familiar on the defensive side of the football with what they were running on offense. And yeah, we got a heavy dose of run, but things we could take away from that first game in our defensive matchups is how to play the way they like to run their quarterback runs, where it's either out of the passing game where no one's open and it's kind of that quarterback's last minute option, or they have it already completely set up. So it's kind of a walk-in for the first 7 yards. And we saw Rising able to get very easy plays in the run game because our defense was so committed to try and stop the run, which they weren't able to do successfully. What you're going to have to do is have every player individually do their job and trust the other guys to do theirs, because sometimes these defensive breakdowns happen because you're trying to do too much. The other team is continuing to pick up first downs. On third down, they're being very efficient. You're just desperately trying to do anything you can, and you crash on the quarterback or you crash on the running back when that's not your job, and the free guy gets free easy 10 yards or touchdown. That's how football's played, and that's going to be the most important part about going on the road to a neutral site and playing the most disciplined football game for 4 quarters that we have all season, because that's what it's going to take to not only force them to pass the ball more, which opens up our best weapon on defense, but get a few turnovers, get them very nervous, get them out of the mode of just running the football down your throat and protecting the football and basically owning the clock.
Well, 2 guys that we spoke about earlier that are going to need to be big and definitely big for that Oregon defense, it's going to be Dorless and it's going to be Popo. Those 2 are going to have a heck of a job clogging up the lane for the sophomore, the 6'2" sophomore out of Dayton, Ohio, Davion Thomas, 94 yards rushing against Oregon. He was also able to score 3 touchdowns in that game, a huge difference maker. Somebody that I said on the podcast that week, hey, look out for this guy. He's going to be a problem if you let him be. He absolutely was. Oregon's really going to need to shut him down and be able to clog those running lanes, ensure that those 5-6 yard gashes that it seems like he was getting whenever he wanted to throughout that game in Salt Lake City aren't available.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not going to be easy. It's there's going to be moments in this game where, unless Utah completely comes out and is completely overconfident, hasn't prepared, which is always a possibility in the game of football, but they got to want this bad. A shot to the Rose Bowl for them has to mean everything. So you're going to get their best shot. There's times as a fan, it's going to get very frustrating. Hopefully, what I really, really care about is that our team, the Oregon Ducks, have made adjustments offensively, defensively, and important to note, on special teams, to not let any big plays happen for Utah, because that was really what broke the camel's back, trying to go into the locker room at halftime. And instead, you're down another 7 points because you didn't punt it out of bounds. You get a return back. And they're going to the locker room, not having to do a whole lot of adjusting, but just celebrating, give their guys a pat on the back, while you have your entire staff trying to get down there, get every aspect of your position groups coached up, and these special teams and offensive and defensive things. There's just too much to try and adjust and change. So I really hope we've done a lot to in the kicking and return game to fix up and shore up a lot of those issues with, getting guys aware of scenarios like the onside kick against Oregon State. If it's going to be a close game, we need to know when our hands team has to be ready. And that's going to be very, very important, I believe, in this game, because I think it's going to be a close one at the end.
Well, and I was about to say the one of the bigger problems we saw in Salt Lake City is the special teams weren't special. They weren't by any means. They gave up some really big mistakes, had a blocked kick, had a missed kick. It was just a nightmare performance from the special teams unit. We're about to get into predictions. We're about to get into our calls. And one thing that I will predict is that Oregon special teams, like you said, they will have to be special. They will have to do what they do best. They've been a great coverage team all year. Besides that Utah game, they're going to need to continue to do that. And I would love to see a special teams touchdown. I don't know if we'll see it. I can't guarantee it. I won't make anything like that. But Oregon hasn't really had that special teams boom of a touchdown that we're used to seeing maybe once or twice a year. I would absolutely love to see that this week in Vegas against Utah.
I would too, but it feels like every time I've asked for it, it's not happened. It's kind of jinxed it. So maybe we break that today by you requesting it quite kindly there. So I'm going to go ahead and break another tradition here. And since, it didn't work for us Utah week, I'm going to go ahead, throw out my prediction first. And of course, my trusty right guard's thinking exactly like I was. I was like 30 or 31, 20. No, I'm going to go ahead and change it up. We are going to go 35-31 Oregon Duckies in Vegas. They're going to have the time of their lives after. Hopefully everyone's responsible. And I think a couple fans and Ducks out there are going to have to go find themselves an O-chain on Vegas the night after. So go ahead, Fremont, you'll find it. Sam, what's your prediction?
This is going to be a really, really tight ball game. Oregon's going to have to play the best football they've played all season. We're going to need to see one of those games that's truly special. I think it happens. Oregon is going to be a 3-time Pac-12 champion, back-to-back. Final score, Oregon 34, Utah 27.
Ooh, okay.
The Ducks are yet again Pac-12 champions.
I love it. And, man, even if not, it's been a really, really special season, really great season of OnceADuck. I know we'll have at least one more bowl episode before we officially transition into the winter sports season. But, man, I'm real proud of both of us for the work we put in. Proud of all our fans that have contributed and continued to like and subscribe and share the podcast. And we hope you're already following us on Twitter. You can go ahead and pat us on the back there too. We always appreciate it. But hey, just the ability to, through thick and thin, be able to produce content here weekly every time we've gotten a game. It's been a lot of fun, giving us a lot of opportunities and a whole lot more on the horizon. A lot of stuff I'm still excited to get to. But hey, here we are. It's exactly where we hoped to be at the beginning of the season. And that didn't always look like we'd be here at the end. But hey, we still got here, buddy, and can't wait to see how this game turns out on Friday. Go Ducks.
You know what, Nick? This is going to be a fun one. I can't wait for it. I can't wait to watch it. I can't wait to hit you up throughout it. And you know what? Who knows? maybe coming up at the end of this year, beginning of next year, OnceADuck might have to be on the road for a big game. Who knows? We'll have to find out.
Might have to be, buddy. And well, hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and stay tuned in. Not going to be quite on the same weekly cadence, maybe even a little more short episodes here and there during the basketball season. But no matter what, we guarantee you, once a duck, always a duck.